He crosses the Tiber alone. His guards are gone. His friends are somewhere behind him. The grove of Farina is quiet at this hour. 121 BC. Rome. This is Roman nights. We go back. We listen. We stay a while. 8 months earlier. He is the tribune who built the grain depots and measured the roads himself. Rome still calls his name when he walks through the forum. Not for much longer. Carthage. Summer. BC 122. Chapter 1. What he was building in Carthage. Carthage. Summer. BC 122. The light here is different from Rome. Comes off the sea in the white dust and the broken stone. All at once. There is no shade before midday. The surveyors have learned to start before dawn and be done by the 9th hour. But noon the ground is too hot to kneel on. The stone which the old city left in enormous quantity absorbs the heat and holds it until after dark. Gaius is already at the boundary marker when the survey crew arrives. He has been there since before the light was good. He came out in the gray before dawn. Tablet. He walked the eastern edge of the site. He does this before the surveyors arrive so he can see what they will see before they see it. Not to correct them. To understand the ground first. The marker is correctly placed. The surveyor did the angle right. He checks it anyway. Then he checks it again. This is what he does when it matters. The colony will be called Junonia. It will sit on the land where Carthage stood before Rome ended. The ground has a specific quality. You can feel it in how the stones lie, not randomly fallen, set once then broken. The geometry of a city underneath the rubble. He has been testing the soil. Rome salted the earth here. This is what people say. He does not believe the salt story. He has tested the soil in 12 places. He has the results in a document. The soil is workable. Things grow. He planted a test row of grain in April. 3 months ago. One of the lower sections. He came back last week. The grain grew. That was the point. That has always been the point. There is land. There are people who need land. The distance between those two things is a law or the absence of one. 6,000 Roman families will farm here if the numbers hold. He has walked the perimeter himself 4 times. He has done the spacing calculations himself. The surveyors have stopped being surprised by any of this. He straightens. He looks south. Africa goes further than you expect. The horizon flat and clear. No weather. No hills to cut. The light into sections. Everything is visible. Everything casts a sharp shadow. He opens his tablet. A small correction to the eastern boundary. Not wrong. More precise. He writes the note. He will fix it himself the way he fixes things. Quietly. Without telling anyone. What? The survey crew will find the marker moved tomorrow morning. They will not know when it happened. He folds the tablet. Junonia will not be completed. He does not know that yet. He has today, and today there is work. In Rome, 8 weeks away by sea, Drusus is in the forum. Reports reach Gaius in the evening, already old when they arrive. He reads them by lamp in the tent that serves as his office. The light is bad. The lamp smokes. He reads anyway. Drusus. Every week. 12 colonies. More land. More of everything. He thanks Gaius for his work. He says there is so much more to do. He smiles when he says it. He has a voice that makes large promises. Sound like careful ones. Gaius understands what Drusus is. He understood from the first. Report. A man the Senate found because they needed a man. Patient. Convincing. Not dishonest in any simple way. Genuinely pleased to stand in the forum and offer things he cannot deliver. This is the most useful kind of man. You can beat an argument. You cannot easily beat a man who agrees with everything you say and offers more of it. He sets the report down. He picks up the next one. In the morning there is work. One of the survey crew is a young man from Capua. 18 years old. This is his first posting. He has been making small errors. For 2 weeks. Not large ones. The kind a young surveyor makes when he is nervous and trying too hard. He overcorrects. The angles come out slightly off. He knows. He tries to fix them. They come out slightly off the other way. Gaius notices on the third day. He says nothing. He watches the pattern. He understands what is happening. On Thursday morning, before the crew starts, he takes the young man to the boundary marker on the western edge. He shows him the angle. He shows him how to find it without the instrument first. He shows him how to check it with the instrument after. He does this without explanation, without mentioning the errors. He shows the thing, and then they go to work. The young man's angles are correct that day. And after, he does not know that Gaius noticed the errors. He does not know. 3 months later, in Rome, in a room he will not be in, someone will give his name. One of the survey crew who worked with Gaius Gracchus in Carthage. His name will be taken down in a list. He will not know until later what the list was for. Gaius will not know any of this either. He has this morning and this light on this ground. He goes back to the eastern boundary. The morning is getting hard. Chapter 2, Rome without him. He came back in September. 4 months in Africa. The ship home was slow. The winds came from the wrong direction for 3 days. He stood at the front of the ship and waited for them to change. They changed on the 4th day. Rome appeared first as a smell, then as a line. Then it was there. He had learned the light in Africa. Flat. Without shadows before. Noon. Everything visible at once. Rome was the other thing. The hills cut the light. Long shadows in the morning. The Tiber, a darker line in the dark. He stepped off the ship and the air was different. He breathed it. It smelled like the city, like old stone and the river and smoke from 10,000 cooking fires. He checked the grain depots on the way from the docks. This was the first thing he did. He stopped at the main depot on the Tiber and went inside. The records were in order. The grain was moving. He went to the forum. People saw him come through. Some stopped. Some called his name. He looked the way a man looks, who has been in Africa for a season. Darker. Thinner. His hands were rough from the measuring rod and the boundary stakes and the survey work. He walked through the forum at his normal pace. Something had changed while he was gone. Not the forum. Not the stones. Something in the weight of attention the forum gave him. He noticed this the way you notice when a room that was loud goes quiet. Not hostile quiet. Something more careful than that. Drusus had been here every week. He had not attacked Gaius. This was the intelligent approach. He had simply appeared beside him in the city's attention and offered more. He had thanked Gaius for his work. He had said there was so much more that could be done. He had stood in one place and been warm. The crowd had not turned against Gaius. They had begun to think of 2 names where before there had been one. This is how you move a city. Not with force, with patience, and a second name. Once a crowd is choosing between 2 men, the question has already changed. The Senate had 400 years of practice at this. He filed for the 3rd tribunate in October. The law permitted it. He had checked the law. Fulvius Flaccus walked with him through the Subura on the campaign days. Flaccus had been consul 2 years before. He was loyal and certain about most things. He was not always careful. Gaius valued the first 2. He kept his 3rd observation to himself. The campaign was different from the first 2. The crowds came. They listened. They thanked him when he was done. He understood what the thanking meant. Gratitude leans. But it is already comfortable. Hunger leans forward. Wants to know what comes next. He had built a crowd that was fed. The grain depots were running. The roads were there. The soldiers had their equipment. The courts had equestrian juries. He had built things people could touch. A crowd that can touch what you built has crossed a line. Is no longer imagining. This is good. It is also, in a specific way, the problem. Imagination is not comfortable. It wants to move toward the thing it imagines. Comfort is comfortable. Is already where it wanted to be. He had built comfort. He had needed to build hunger. He understood this difference standing in the Subura in October, watching people thank him. He had understood it since Sardinia. He had tried to build both at once. He had not quite succeeded. A letter came from Misenum in October. Cornelia wrote about the garden and the sea. At the end she wrote, "Your brother thought he knew enough." She had written this before. He read it as a warning. He read it the way he read all her warnings. As a fact, she had decided to say once. She would not repeat it. Whether he used it was his choice. He wrote back. He told her the depots were still running. He told her the system was designed to outlast any one office. He said he was going to try for the third year. She did not reply before the election. He walked home through the Suburra one night and counted 3 exits from the forum without planning to. He noticed. He stopped. He had counted as a decision for 2 years. He had kept it a decision. Tonight it was habit again. He noticed the difference. He made himself stop. Lucius Opimius was standing for consul that year. He had been working to repeal the grain law since spring. He was patient. The right office was coming. The elections were in November. Both of them. Chapter 3, The Vote. The vote came back before noon. He was not elected. He stood in the forum after. The crowd that had been there for the counting had thinned. People had places to be. Some stayed. Near him, Flaccus was there. A few others. Nobody spoke for a while. He counted the exits. 3 if you included the lane beside the Temple of Vesta. He had counted that lane as a decision for 2 years. Today it was habit again. He noticed. He stopped. The forum was cold. November cold that settles into old stone. Before dawn and does not leave. He stood in it and looked at the rostra. He had turned right from that platform on his first day. Faced the crowd instead of the Senate. 2 years ago. The forum had been full. People had leaned toward him. He looked at the rostra for a moment. Then he looked at the stones in front of him. The same stones as 2 years ago. The same square. The same cold. Something was different. He was in it. That was the difference. The stones did not know. Flaccus came to stand beside him. He said nothing. Flaccus had learned over 2 years when saying nothing was the right choice. He was not always good at it. Today he was. They stood in the forum and the forum continued around them. Merchants. A cart at the edge of the square. A dog near the Temple of Castor. The forum continued. It always did. Without the tribunate he was a citizen. A citizen could be prosecuted. His laws could be reviewed. The grain law could be repealed. The jury reform could be reversed. The road commission could be reconstituted under different terms. He had built a system designed to outlast one man. He had not finished it in time. He had known this was possible. Knowing the thing in advance does not make the thing smaller when it arrives. He had known this about knowing. He knew it again now. Opimius had won his election the same morning Gaius lost his. This was not chance. The Senate did not leave these things to chance when it had the means to arrange them. He knew the means. He had been watching them for 2 years. He had been watching them since he read his brother's papers in the year he came back from Sardinia. He had still not found a way to stop it. He thought about this on the walk home. The grain depots, still running. The roads, the milestone markers standing straight. In the dark south of Rome. Stone lasts longer than offices. He had believed this. He still believed it. He had also believed a system was harder to dismantle than an idea. He had built a system because of this belief. He was not sure yet whether the belief would hold. He would find out in the next few months. He thought about 3,000 people. 3,000 people had supported him openly this year. But their names to things stood in the forum when the forum was watching. Said, "I am with this man." He thought about those names. What they would mean in a month. In 2 months. A name on a list is one thing when the man at the top of the list has an office. It is a different thing when he does not. He thought about this once. Then he stopped. He told himself, the work mattered more than the man who did it. This is true. He had known it for 10 years. He still knew it. Cold November afternoon. No office. No protection. The consul, who had been waiting for exactly this moment. It is still true. Just not at this hour. He went home. He sat at his desk. He looked at the notes from 9 years of working. He was not ready to put them away. He was not ready to use them either. He sat at the desk for a long time. Then he went to bed. Chapter 4, the Aventine. The Senate passed the measure before noon. The Senatus Consultum Ultimum. The final decree. They had never used it before. It said, the consul shall take whatever steps are necessary to defend the Republic. It meant, what comes next is outside the law. Opimius called it the defense of the Republic. He was not lying. This is what men do when they have already decided what to do. They find the correct word for it. They say the word until they believe it. Opimius believed it. He had been building toward this belief since spring. This is what made him the right man for the work, not cruelty, belief. Gaius and Flaccus gathered their supporters on the Aventine. The hill in the morning was quiet. Birds. The city below but distant. A few hundred men. Armed but not in formation. Not an army. Enough to show they were serious. Also enough to give Opimius the thing he needed. A reason. Gaius knew which of these it was. He had known it the night before when the Senate passed the measure. He had sat with the news for an hour. He thought about the grain depots, the roads, the 3,000 people who had put their names to things. He thought about Flaccus, who was loyal and certain and not careful. He thought about his brother, standing on a different hill in October 9 years before. He went to the Aventine anyway. He went because the other option was to let Opimius move without any response. He had thought about this carefully. A man who has spent 2 years building things for people does not dissolve. When the Senate passes a decree, he goes to the hill. He sends a man down to negotiate. The son of Flaccus, young, brave. Opimius sends him back without a message. Flaccus speaks to the crowd on the hill. Loud, certain, his way. The crowd listens the way frightened people listen to certainty. It is not comfort. It is a handhold. Gaius stands at the back and says nothing. He counts the exits from the Aventine. Not 3, 5 maybe. More than 5 with the side streets. He stops counting. He is not going to run. He has known this since last night. Running changes what this was. He does not want to change what this was. He wants it to be what it is. Clearly. For the record. For the 3,000 names. The fighting starts below on the slope before midday. The men Opimius had were trained soldiers. The men on the hill were loyal. These are different things. Loyal is not the same as trained. He knew this. He had always known this. He had known it in Sardinia, at Numantia, in every room where he had argued for the people who worked the farms. Knowing it did not change it. Flaccus died in the early afternoon. His son too. Gaius did not hear about this immediately. He heard the sounds, and understood what the sounds meant. He did not stop to confirm. There was nothing to confirm that the sounds had not already said. He went down the western side of the hill. His slave Philocrates came with him. Philocrates had been with him since he was 20. He did not ask questions. He went where Gaius went. This was the arrangement, and it had always been this arrangement, and today it was the same. They moved without running. Running changes how people look at him. He had made this decision on the hill. He would walk. He did not look back. He crossed the Tiber at the wooden bridge. The city behind him was loud. He walked north along the river. The grove of Farina was ahead. He had been here once as a boy, with his father. He did not remember the visit clearly. He remembered the trees, the way they stood together, the quality of the light between them. He went in. Philocrates came with him. The Senate put a price on his head while he was still crossing the bridge. Opimius called it necessary. He was not wrong about the necessity. Everything they had done was necessary. Everything they did was the defense of something. They had a name for what they were defending. They believed in the name. 3,000 people would be killed in the days that followed. His supporters. People who had signed their names. People who had stood in the forum and called his name on cold mornings. When the forum was full, Opimius would call this the restoration of order. The Senate would award him a temple for it. All of this will happen. He does not know it yet. He is in the grove, in the light between the trees. He stood. He was 32 years old. He had the grain law, the roads, the jury reform, the milestone markers standing south of Rome. He had built a system he had believed was harder to kill than an idea. He was not sure now whether this belief was correct. He would not find out. That was one of the things he was not going to find out. He stood in the grove and listened. The trees were old. Their roots went down into ground that was here before Rome was a city, before the hill had a name. He had spent 2 years thinking about stone. He had not thought much about roots. Roots last longer than stone. You cannot see them. He had this afternoon, this grove, these trees. It was what there was. Chapter 5. The same window. Misenum. By the sea. The light here comes off the water in the morning. It hits the white walls of the house and spreads across the floor. It does not ask anything of you. It is simply light. Cornelia has lived with it for years. She has learned how to receive it. The visitor arrives before she has finished her morning. She does not ask him to sit. She stands at the window and listens. She does not interrupt. She already knows most of what he is going to say. The news from Rome has been arriving in pieces. For 4 days. She has been putting the pieces in order. The order is not good. When he finishes, she thanks him by name. She uses it at the end of the sentence once where it does the most work. The visitor feels he was expected, that she is glad he came even on this errand. He will remember this for a long time. He is not sure why. He leaves. She does not cry while he is there. She does not cry right after. She stands at the window. The sea is the same sea it was yesterday. It does not know what happened. It has been here since before the city and it will be here after. She already buried one son this way, 9 years ago. The Capitoline in October in the cold. It stood at a window then too. A different window. A different hill. The same sea somewhere beyond the view. She remembers the morning she heard about Tiberius. She had been in the garden. A man arrived from Rome. He was out of breath. He did not know how to begin. She helped him begin. She has a habit of this, of helping people say difficult things. It does not know when she learned it. She was not finished with her sons then. She is still not finished. Not in the way mothers finish with their children. She thinks about them in the present tense. Sometimes without planning to. Then she corrects herself. The correction is the grief. Small. Exact. Every day. Later she writes a letter. This is what she does with difficult things. She gives them a date and a name and a sentence that is as clear as she can make. Then she folds them away. The letter is to a friend in Rome. She writes about the boys, not how they died, what they were before they were a cause. Tiberius, who measured the land and believed the right answer, was enough. Gaius, who built the system and checked the boundary, stones himself, who walked the roads he laid and stopped at each milestone. She writes they were right. She does not write it did not matter. She knows it mattered. The grain law is still running. Some of the roads are still there. The jury reform did not survive. But the idea of what is possible is harder to kill than one law. The idea is in the grain, in the roads, in the 3,000 people who put their names to things. Some of them are alive. She folds the letter. She will send it tomorrow. She thinks about what she raised them to be. She has thought about this many times. She will think about it until she cannot think anymore. She raised them to look at the city and see what it was and not look away from the seeing. This is what she gave them. Their father gave them the names. The philosophers gave them the arguments. She gave them the habit of not looking away. This is a thing you can give a child. You can give it. Watch it work. Know that you gave it. Also know that you gave them to this. She has not found a way around this. She has stopped looking. For one The sea outside makes its afternoon sound. Wind off the water. A gull somewhere above the house. The light has moved. She has outlived 2 sons. She intends to outlive the men who killed them. Not through revenge. She has never been interested in revenge. Revenge is a short answer to a long question. She is interested in the long question. What Rome is. What it could be. Whether the distance can be closed by people like her sons. Whether it requires a different kind of person. Whether it simply cannot be closed. She does not know the answer. She has been sitting with this question for 9 years. She is still sitting with it. Through time. This is how she will outlive them. Not by doing anything in particular. By continuing. By writing. By receiving visitors and using their names. By sitting with the question. Until the question is answered or she is not there to ask it. She has always been better at time than they were. She is still there. Chapter 6. The ground that grew. The test row grew. He had planted it in April in one of the lower sections where the drainage was better. He had done the soil tests first. He had done them in 12 locations across the site. He had the results in a document. The document said, the ground is workable. He had planted the row anyway. Not because he doubted the document. Because a document that says the ground is workable is not the same as grain in the ground. You need both. The document tells you what the ground should do. The grain tells you what it does. He had come back 3 months later. The grain was there. He stood in the row and looked at it. Green stalks above the white dust of the site. He checked the height against the projection. It was within range. He checked the density. Also, within range. He pulled one stalk. He looked at the roots. The roots went down the right distance. He stood in the test row for about 3 minutes. He filed the result. He had told the commission in Rome that the ground was workable. He had sent the document. He had sent the yield projection. He had sent the soil tests. He had sent the drainage analysis. He had sent the comparative data from similar sites in Sicily. He had sent the engineer's report on the water table. The commission had received all of this. The commission had read some of it. The commission had scheduled a session. The session had produced the phrase, historical significance. He had expected this. He had not expected to be standing in the test row when he thought about it. He had expected to be in Rome in a committee, prepared with a counter-argument. But here he was. Carthage in August. The grain was correct. The grain did not care about historical significance. He filed this thought separately. It did not go in a document. It went in the part of his thinking that held things that were true but not useful in committee. The survey crew was still working. They had been here since April. He had been here since June. He had gone back to Rome in July for the committee session and then come back in August. The survey continued while he was gone. He had designed it to continue without him. A system that stops when the person in charge leaves is not a system. He checked the work they had done in his absence. He started from the eastern boundary and worked west. He checked each boundary marker. He had a list. The markers were in the right places. He made small notes. 2 markers would need repositioning by the spring. Not wrong. More precise. The difference between correct and precise was not always apparent. He had learned to care about both. The young man from Capua was still working. His angles were correct. Had been since the morning Gaius showed him. He did not talk much. He worked and the work was right. Gaius had noted this in June. He noted it again now. Some people, when they understand what you are teaching, become more talkative. They explain the understanding back to you. Some people go quiet and do the work. He preferred the second kind. The light went bad at the 9th hour. This was the signal to stop. You did not push survey work into bad light. Bad light produced errors you could not see until the next day when it was too late to undo easily. He called the end of work. The crew packed the instruments. He packed his tablet. He had written 58 notes today. Some were measurements. Some were observations about the ground. Some were questions to answer tomorrow. He had a numbering system for the notes. He had been using this system since before the tribunate. He walked back to the survey tent. He ate. He read the report from Rome that had arrived that afternoon. Drusus again. The 12 colonies. The forum. The particular warmth. He folded the report. He picked up the next one. Chapter 7. The changed forum. He came back from Africa in September. The ship took 4 days. The wind was from the wrong direction. For 2 of them. He stood at the front of the ship on both wrong days and watched the water. The water was doing what the water did. It did not cooperate with schedules. He arrived at the docks before dawn. He went to the grain depot. This was the first thing. Not because something was wrong. Because the depot was where the system reported its own health. He went inside. He read the numbers for August. The August numbers were within projection. He checked the variance. 3.5%. Good. He left the depot. He walked to the forum. Something had settled while he was gone. He felt it before he could name it. Not hostile. Not wrong. A different weight in the forum's attention. A room that reached a conclusion before you arrived. That feeling. He walked through the square. People saw him. Some nodded. Some called his name. He walked. At his normal pace. He did not stop. He understood what had happened. He had understood it from the reports in Africa. Drusus in the forum every week. The 12 colonies. The specific warmth. The crowd not against. Gaius. The crowd considering. 2 names where there had been one. A crowd that is considering is not lost. It is holding 2 things in waiting. He had built a system. The system was still running. The grain was moving. The roads were there. He had been in Africa for 3 months. The forum had not waited for him to return before developing an opinion. Forums never do. He went to see the road commission accounts. He had left 3 administrators. They had produced monthly reports. He had read the reports in Africa. He read them again. Now, with the forum fresh in his mind, he was looking for the places where the accounts diverged from what he had felt in the square. He found one. The Subura distribution point had shown an attendance decrease. In August, not large, 4% below projection. The account gave 2 explanations. One was weather. One was route change. He went to the Subura. He walked the route from the distribution point to the main square. He timed it. 11 minutes. Then he walked the alternate route that someone had posted on a board outside the point. 14 minutes. 3 minutes longer. But the alternate route went through a shaded street that was cooler in August. In August, in the Subura, a 3-minute difference and a shaded street could produce a 4% attendance shift. He went back to the accounts. He wrote in the margin, weather, route. No operational issue. He moved on. This was the practice. You feel something in the forum. Go to the numbers. You find the number that corresponds to the feeling. You understand the connection. You move on. Drusus had been in the forum 3 times that week. He had not attacked the grain law. He had not attacked the roads. He had not attacked the jury reform. He had thanked all 3. He had said, Gaius has begun good work. There is so much more to do. He had proposed specific additions, not vague ones. The 12 colonies had locations now. He had named them. Well, named locations. He did not have surveys for any of them. Gaius had surveys for 1. 1 versus 12. Surveys versus names. The crowd did not always know the difference between a survey and a name. This was not ignorance. It was a reasonable way to process information. Most of what anyone knows about most things is a name, not a survey. He had surveys. He had soil tests. He had grain growing in the test row. He had 1. The commission session was in the afternoon. He went. He presented the African report. He walked the committee through the survey status. He presented the soil test results. He showed the grain yield projection next to the test row data. The committee listened. The senator from the Northern District said, the site raises concerns that go beyond soil chemistry. He said, the concerns are noted. The soil chemistry is correct. The senator said, we do not question the chemistry. He said, then we have no technical obstacle. The room went quiet. The room understood. He had answered correctly. The question would return next session in different language. He understood this too. He was ready for the next language. He always was. Chapter 8, the Third Campaign. October. BC 122. He filed for the Third Tribunate in October. He used the word campaign in his mind. Not publicly. Publicly it was a filing. A process. Days when he went to certain places and spoke and used names. Internally, campaign. He had been in enough campaigns to know the difference between a process and a campaign. A process follows a path. A campaign reads the ground. He read the ground in October. The ground had changed since the first year. He had measured. Not with a rod. With the crowd. The early arrivals. The bread woman. The attendants at the grain depots. The number of men who had come to the forum on a cold morning and stayed for the full speech. The number who had left early. He had a picture. The picture was not bad. The grain law was running. The roads were there. The jury reform had produced 2 more convictions in October. The colonial survey was complete. He had the system. The system was working. People were living in it. Some of them knew who had built it. Most did not. This was fine. He had built it to be a system, not a monument. Monuments require people to remember them. A system requires people to use it. The grain recipients who had stopped knowing his name were still using the depot. The grain still moved. The price was still what the law said it should be. The system was the point. Flaccus walked with him through the Aventine. Fulvius Flaccus had been consul 2 years before. He was loyal and direct. He sometimes moved faster than the situation required. He had been useful for 2 years. He was useful now. Flaccus said, the numbers look good. He said, the numbers are good. The direction is different. Flaccus waited. He said, a crowd that is grateful is not the same as a crowd that is hungry. We build things they can touch. That is good. Touch is not hunger. Touch is satisfied. Satisfied crowds think about the future differently. Flaccus said, differently how? He said, they compare. They did not used to compare. They wanted. Now they have something. They compare what they have to what someone else offers. Drusus offers more. The crowd compares. Flaccus said, can we offer more than Drusus? He thought about this. He said, we can offer something he cannot. Things that exist. He spent 3 days visiting the Subura before the campaign. He did not go to speak. He went to listen. He walked through the streets. He stopped at stalls. He used names. He listened. What he heard was not opposition. Not enthusiasm either. Something between. The particular sound of a neighborhood that has received something. Still deciding if more of the same is what it wants. Or something different. This was the sound Drusus had produced. Not by attacking what Gaius had built. By proposing a different future. He listened to the Subura for 3 days. On the 3rd day, a man at a grain stall said, the depots. Or, he said it as a fact, not as a compliment. The man had been coming to the depot since August of the previous year. He knew the depot the way you know something that has stopped being new. It was part of the calendar. Grain. Tuesday. He thanked the man. He used his name. He walked on. He thought, that is the transition. When a thing stops being new and becomes a Tuesday. He had built a Tuesday. He was not sure what to build next. That would be a Tuesday without already being one. The campaign ran for 3 weeks. He spoke every day. He moved when he spoke. He gave the crowds the next problem. Not the depots, which were a Tuesday. The next problem. He gave them the Italian question again. The leather worker. The grain merchant. The veteran and the scar. The crowds came. They listened. Some stayed after. He watched the quality of the staying. This was how he measured. Not the applause. The staying. People who stay after a speech have decided something. People who leave on schedule have heard something they will consider. The ratio was shifting. More people left on schedule. Fewer stayed. He filed this. He kept going. Chapter 9. Flaccus and the Italian Men. Flaccus had a plan. He had been developing it since the spring. He told Gaius about it in November. He laid it out directly and at speed, with full confidence that the confidence would carry the gaps. The plan? Organize the Italian allies. Not legally. Not through the tribunate. Personally. Go to the towns. Meet the men who had influence. Build a network that could be called on when the moment required it. Gaius listened. He said, "What moment?" Flaccus said, "The moment when the Senate moves against the Italian rights question. We will have people we can mobilize." Gaius thought about this. The Italian rights question was real. He had known this since the leather worker and the grain merchant and the veteran. The problem was not identifying the injustice. The problem was the mechanism. Legal routes had failed. He had tried the legal routing committee. The committee had not moved. The Flaccus plan was a different kind of mechanism. He had concerns about it. He had concerns about Flaccus in general. Flaccus was loyal. He was certain. These were good qualities. He also moved faster than the situation sometimes allowed for. He had done this as consul. He had done it in committee sessions. He moved to the conclusion before the room was ready. In a legal setting, moving too fast produced the wrong vote. In a political setting, moving too fast produced something else. He thought about the Capitoline. His brother had had loyal, certain people around him too. The difference between a loyal crowd and a force was not always visible until the moment when it became relevant. He did not say this to Flaccus. He said, "Let me see the list." Flaccus had a list. He had been to 7 towns. He had names. He had people who had agreed to maintain contact. Gaius read the list. The names were real. Men of standing in their towns. Men who had reasons to want the Italian question resolved. Men who had been at the Numantine War. Men who had sons in the legions. He said, "Keep the contact. Do not call it a network." Flaccus said, "Why not?" He said, "Because a network is a thing that can be pointed to. We need things that can be used, not pointed to." Flaccus understood this. He was not always fast about political precision. He was fast about practical things. He kept the contact. 2 years before his tribunate, a town called Fregelli made a decision. Fregelli was a Latin colony. It had Latin rights but not full citizenship. The town had been patient. It had sent representatives to Rome. It had used the legal mechanisms. The legal mechanisms had produced the phrase, "further study." Fregelli decided not to wait for further study. It rose in revolt. Not a large revolt. A small one. The kind that is more a statement than a military event. The town had no army. It had its people. Its anger. A decision made by men who had waited a long time. Rome put it down in a week. Then Rome destroyed the town. Not as punishment. As demonstration. This is what happens to towns that do not wait. The demonstration was clear. The Senate called it a necessary response. The Senate was not wrong about the necessity from the Senate's position. Everything the Senate did was necessary. From the Senate's position. Gaius had heard about Fregelli in Rome. He was in his office when the report arrived. He read it once. He set it down. He sat for a moment. He picked it up. Read it again. He thought they were right that the weight was wrong. They were right that the legal mechanisms were not moving. They chose the only mechanism left to them. He did not say this out loud. He filed it in the part of his thinking that held things that were true and not useful to say. The Fregelli report changed the Italian question. Not by making it easier. By making it more visible. Rome had destroyed a town. The Italian allies in other towns knew what had been destroyed and why. The men on Flaccus's list knew. They wrote to each other. They used the contact Flaccus had maintained. Gaius read the letters. The letters were careful. Men who have seen a town destroyed for the wrong words are careful about what they write. But the careful words contained The careful anger of people who had been careful for a long time. He understood. He wrote back to 3 of the men. He used their names. He said, "The question is in the record. It will not disappear from the record. The record is permanent." He was not sure this was enough. He sent the letters. Chapter 10, Opimius. Lucius Opimius stood for consul in the autumn. He had been planning this for 2 years. He had done it carefully. He had built the case in the rooms where these things were decided, not the forum rooms. The forum rooms were where you announced the decision. The actual rooms were smaller, less light, better wine. He had been in those rooms. He was patient. This was his most useful quality. He had the patience of a man who has decided what will happen, waiting for the conditions. He did not force conditions. He waited for them. The conditions were becoming correct. He did not hate Gaius Gracchus. This is worth stating. Hate is a simple motive, and Opimius was not a simple man. He had clear and considered views about what Rome required. He had held these views for 20 years. They were not views he had arrived at for personal benefit, though. Personal benefit was a pleasing alignment. He genuinely believed the tribunate of Gaius Gracchus was a threat Rome needed to address before it became structural. His evidence. The tribunate had changed the jury composition. This was a structural change. You could reverse a law. You could not easily reverse the expectation that juries would have mixed composition. The expectation would remain after the law was reversed. The expectation was what mattered. The tribunate had built grain depots connected to a road system connected to administrators loyal to the tribune. A parallel structure. This was a parallel system. Parallel systems were not neutral. He wrote these concerns in his own notes. He kept the notes. He had always kept careful notes. He went to the forum on the days Drusus spoke. Not to be seen with Drusus. To watch the crowd. He had been watching the forum's crowd for 15 years. He knew what a shifting crowd looked like. He knew the difference between a crowd that was moving and a crowd that was waiting. This crowd was waiting. He knew what it was waiting for. It was waiting to see which man held more. Gaius had built things. Drusus had named things. The crowd was comparing names to things. This was an unusual comparison. Usually you compared things to things or names to names. The comparison of names to things was harder to read. You read it. The crowd was not yet done with Gaius. But the crowd was open. Open was enough. He continued his campaign. He did not speak against Gaius. He spoke about order. He spoke about the kind of city Rome was and the kind of city Rome had always been. He used the word constitution 17 times in one speech. He counted them afterward. He thought 17 was the right number. Enough to establish the frame. Not enough to make the repetition visible. He was good at frames. A frame is not an argument. An argument requires evidence. Frame requires repetition. Say the same shape enough times. The shape becomes the container for everything else. His frame, stability, order, the proven ways. Everything Gaius had done could be understood inside this frame. As disruption, even when the disruption was working. Even when the depots were running. Even when the roads were there. He won his election in November. He filed the result in the same way he filed all results. As data for the next decision. The next decision was already forming. Chapter 11, After the vote. The vote came back before noon. He was not elected. He knew before the count was finished. He had been counting. Through the morning. Not the official count. His own. He had people in the right places who gave him numbers. The numbers had been telling him since the 8th hour. He stood in the forum after. The crowd had thinned. It always thinned after the count. People had places to be. Some stayed near him. He looked at the rostra. He counted the exits. 3. He stopped counting. He had made this a decision. Today it had become habit again. He noticed. He stopped. Flaccus was beside him. He said nothing. They stood for a while. He thought about the number. Not the vote count. The number of months. He had been calculating. It's since November. He had 9 months of the second term. The second term was the last legal term. Without the tribunate he was a private citizen. A private citizen who had passed 4 laws that were still running. A private citizen who had roads south of Rome and grain moving through depots. A private citizen without legal protection. He had known this was coming. He had built around it. He had designed the laws to be hard to dismantle in one move. He had given the administration to 3 people, not 1, so a single change in administration did not control everything. He had tried to build beyond himself. He was not sure it was enough. He went home. He sat at his desk. The documents were in order. He looked at them. Not reading, looking. He knew what they said. He had written most of them. He looked at them the way you look at work you have done, trying to decide if it will hold. He thought about the Italian men, the leather worker, the merchant from Cume, the veteran from Nola, their names in the document. He thought about Frigelli, the town that had not waited. He thought about his brother. He allowed himself to do this on certain evenings, not as a habit, as a specific deliberate practice. He thought about Tiberius for 10 minutes and then he stopped. He thought Tiberius had the right answer. He had the right process. He believed the right answer through the right process would be received correctly. He was wrong about the receiving. What he himself had done differently, the system, the connection between the pieces, the design for durability. He was not sure it was enough. He had tried. The fire was low. He did not tend it. The city made its night sounds outside. Carts on stone. The river. A dog. He had been here for 2 years in the city. Had not run out of night sounds. There were always more. He thought about what the next days required. Not the next year. The next days. He had always worked in days. A year was a collection of days. You worked the day in front of you. You did not work the year. Tomorrow, the grain commission accounts. The road inspection. Report. A letter to the Italian men on the list. Response. To the senator who had asked about the court reform numbers. He had work to do. He went to bed. He did not sleep well. He slept. Chapter 12. The Emergency Decree. The Senate passed the measure on a Thursday. The Senatus Consultum Ultimum, the ultimate decree, had never been used before. It said, the consuls may take whatever steps are necessary to defend the Republic. Did not specify what those steps were. That was the design. The design was not accidental. Men who write blank authorizations understand what they are writing. Opimius called it a restoration of order. He believed this. He had believed it for 2 years. The belief made him effective. A man who is uncertain about the necessity of what he is doing slows down. A man who believes is faster. The decree passed before noon. Gaius heard about it in the afternoon. He was at his desk. The report came from a senator he trusted who had not voted for. The senator said, I tried. The vote was not close. He thanked the senator. He used his name. He folded the letter. He sat. He thought about the instrument. The Senatus Consultum Ultimum was an instrument, like a measuring rod or a grain depot or a boundary marker. An instrument does what it was designed to do in the hands of the person holding it. Opimius was holding it. What it was designed to do, authorize anything. That was the text. Whatever steps are necessary. The word necessary was doing all the work. Necessary according to whom? According to the person holding the instrument. He had built instruments. The grain law. The jury reform. He had thought carefully about how they would work in different hands. He had designed them to be limited, to do specific things, and not other things. He had not designed for an instrument that had no limit. He should have. He understood this now. The Senate had found the counter to a system of limited instruments. An unlimited one. The counter to a grain law is not an argument about grain. The counter is an instrument that can do anything. He filed this. He was not sure how to use what he had filed. Flaccus wanted to respond. He came to see him that evening. He was already organizing. He had the Aventine in mind. The men on the list, some people, who had come from the Italian towns. He had a plan. Gaius listened. He said, "If we respond with force, we give them the word for what we are." Flaccus said, "We are already giving them the word. The decree is the word. They have already decided what we are." He thought about this. Flaccus was not wrong. The decree had already named them. The name was a threat to the Republic. The decree said so. He said, "If we respond, it should be clearly what it is, not force that can be called something else." Flaccus said, "What can we do that cannot be called something else?" He said, "Go to the hill. Be present. Send a man to negotiate. Make them say no in public." Flaccus said, "They will say no." He said, "Yes. And then there will be a record of the no." Flaccus understood. He went to prepare the Aventine. The evening before the Aventine, he sat with the documents. He did not try to work. He looked at them. The grain commission, the road reports, the court reform numbers. 3 of 4 parts of the system. Running. He thought about the system. He had believed a system was harder to kill than an idea. It could reverse a law. The system that implemented the law was harder. He needed to dismantle it piece by piece. Each piece supported the others. He still believed this. He also knew that an instrument with no limits was a different kind of problem from a reversed law. The unlimited instrument could dismantle a limited system. This was the logic. He had known it since the decree arrived. He had known it before. But he had not built a counter. He thought, "I should have built a counter." He thought, "I did not have time." He thought, "Time was not the issue. I built what I could build." The counter would have required a different kind of instrument. I did not know before today what kind. Now he knew. Too late to build. He set the documents down. He sat for a while. Chapter 13. The Hill in the Morning. The Aventine. Before dawn. The men were already there when he arrived. A few hundred. Armed. Not in formation. He had asked them not to be in formation. Formation changes what something is. A few hundred armed men in formation on a hill in Rome is an army. A few hundred armed men not in formation is a group of citizens on a hill. He needed them to be citizens. He needed the difference to be visible. He checked the exits from the Aventine. 5 if you count it. The side streets. More than 5 with the alleys. He stopped counting. He had made counting a decision. He had made this decision on the first morning of the first year. For 2 years. He had held it as a decision. Today it was habit again. He stopped. Flaccus was already speaking. He had not asked him to speak yet. Flaccus spoke when he had something to say. This was not always useful. This morning it was necessary. The men needed something to focus on. The hill. In the morning. The decree from yesterday. The sound of the city below. He watched the men listen. He had spoken to crowds in the forum for 2 years. He knew the difference. A crowd listening to an argument. A crowd listening because the speaker was the only sound. These men were in the second category. Not because Flaccus was not saying true things. Because they were on a hill and the decree was from yesterday. He stood at the back and did not speak. He sent the son of Flaccus to negotiate. Young. Brave. He had a good face for it. The kind of face that communicated sincerity, which was not a performance. He was sincere. This was going to hurt him. Sincere messengers get hurt by what happens to the message. They believed it meant something. It meant something different. He watched him go. He thought about the counter. The instrument with no limit. He had been thinking about it since yesterday evening. He had not found an answer. He did not find one this morning. The son of Flaccus came back. Opimius had sent him back without a reply. He had expected this. He had told Flaccus he expected this. He had sent the messenger anyway. Now there was a record. A record of a messenger sent and sent back. A record of a request for negotiation refused. The record did not feel useful from here. It was still the right thing to have done. The fighting started below. Not at once. It started at the edge of where the hill met. the streets below it. He heard the sounds before he saw anything. Then he saw the shapes moving up the slope. Opimius had soldiers. Trained ones. Not the men on the hill. Not even Flaccus, who had been a consul, who had commanded men before. There is a difference between a man who has commanded and a soldier who has trained. He had known this. He had known it would matter. He stood at the back of the hill and listened. The sounds told him what was happening before the men who were in it knew. He had learned to read sound this way in Sardinia, at Numantia, in the camps. Sound arrives before information. You learn to use it. He used it now. He understood what the sounds meant. He went down the western side of the hill. Chapter 14. The Grove in the Afternoon. He crossed the Tiber at the wooden bridge. He walked. He did not run. Running changes how people see. He had decided this on the hill. He would not run. He would walk at the pace of a man who knows where he is going. Philocrates walked with him. His slave of 12 years. He did not ask questions. He had never asked questions. He went where Gaius went and did the things that needed doing and did not require explanation. Gaius had never explained and Philocrates had never asked. This was the arrangement. The arrangement continued today. North along the river. The grove of Farina ahead. He had been here once as a boy. With his father. He did not remember the visit in full. He remembered the trees. The way they stood together. The quality of the light between them. Not Roman light. Older. The light that comes through trees. That have been there since before the city named itself. He went in. Philocrates came with him. He stood in the grove and listened. The trees. The river somewhere behind them. The city sounds. Fading as the trees thickened. A bird. He did not know what kind. He had never been good at birds. He stood. He thought about the road. The milestone markers south of Rome. Standing in the dark. He had checked them in November. They were correct. He had expected them to be correct. He checked them anyway. The grain was moving. Today. On a Thursday. The depots were open. The price was what the law said it should be. The jury. Reform was in place. The roads were there. The system was running. He had built a system designed to outlast the person who built. He had designed it for durability. He had checked the pieces the way he checked the milestones. Not because he doubted them. Because checking was the practice. He did not know if it would hold. He had done what he could do with the time he had. He was 32 years old. He had been consul for 2 years. No, tribune. He kept thinking consul. Tribune. He had been tribune for 2 years. He had the grain law. The roads. The jury reform. The colonial survey completed, sitting in a document case on his desk. He had tried the Italian bill 3 times. He had the names. In the document case. The leather worker. The grain merchant. The veteran and the scar. He had the record. The record was in the right places. He had done this. He had put the things in the right places. In documents. In the hands of the administrators who knew what to do with them. In the road south of Rome that went where it went and had the markers he had checked. He stood in the grove. The trees were old. Their roots went down into ground that was here before Rome was a city. He had spent 2 years thinking about stone. He had not thought much about roots. Roots go down. They do not go anywhere visible. They go into the dark and hold what they are holding and do not announce it. He had tried to put things in the ground. He had tried. Chapter 15. What the system did. The grain law continued. 3 days after the grove, the depots opened at the 6th hour. The grain was there. The price was what the law said. The recipients came. They brought their tablets. The tablets were checked against the list. The grain was distributed. Nobody stopped the distribution that day. There was no mechanism in place to stop it on that day. The decree authorized the consuls to take necessary steps. The consuls had taken steps. The distribution was not one of them. The distribution was a different category. It had its own administrators, its own supply chain, its own list. The system ran. He had designed it to run. He had designed it so that the person who built it was not the mechanism that kept it going. The mechanism was the lists, the administrators, the depots, the price rule written into the law. The system did not know what had happened in the grove. The system knew one thing: it was Thursday. Grain. Tuesday. And Thursday. The recipients came. The Road Commission produced its October report. Same format as the previous 17. All 9 routes complete. Variance within range. The maintenance schedule was attached. He had required that from the charter. A road without maintenance was a road rebuilt in 10 years. The report was routine. He had designed it to be routine. The jury reform produced a conviction in October. A senator from the Western District. The charge was extortion. In his province, the evidence was the kind of evidence that had previously been submitted and not acted on in senatorial courts. The equestrian jury heard the evidence. The jury convicted. The conviction held. An appeal was filed. The appeal process took 3 months. At the end of 3 months, the conviction was confirmed. He had designed the appeals process too. He had known that convictions would be challenged. He had built a confirmation step that required a second hearing with specific evidentiary standards. The standards were in the law. The law had the standards in the law because he had put them there. The conviction held. The senator paid the penalty. The colonial survey report went to the committee. This happened 6 months after the grove. The commission had continued the survey work after. The young man from Capua had continued. The eastern boundary was correctly positioned. The soil tests held. The drainage analysis was complete. The committee received the report. The committee produced a phrase: the matter requires further consideration. This was the same phrase. He had expected it would be the same phrase. He had sent the report anyway. The report was in the committee record. The committee record was permanent. In 20 years someone would find the record. The surveys. The soil test. The grain that had grown in the test row. The ground was workable. He had said so. The ground had said so. The committee phrase was also in the record. Both were permanent. Let the next person read both and decide what to make of the difference between them. Chapter 16. Misenum After. Misenum. November. BC 121. The report arrived on a Thursday. She read it at the desk in the afternoon when the light was flat. She always read reports in the flat afternoon light. The flat light was honest. It did not make things look better than they were. It showed documents as documents. She read the report. She set it down. She read it again. She had known something was wrong in September. Not because of the reports. Before the reports. The reports told you what had happened. She had learned to feel what was happening while it was still happening. She had learned this from her husband. He had called it reading the air. She had never found a better name for it. The air in September had been wrong. She had not written this in the small tablet. She had not wanted to be right. She had put down the tablet and walked to the garden and looked at the sea and come back inside. She had been right. She was now reading what she had been right about. She sat for a long time. The sea was outside. November sea. Not the August sea she had watched from the same window. The November sea was gray and direct. It did not ask anything. It was there. She had been receiving reports for 3 years. She had the tablets from each month. She had the notations in the small tablet by the window. The margins. The marks she used for things requiring attention. The marks for things that were true and not useful to say. She had the record of what she had read while it was happening. She had not been able to change it. This was the part she had always known but had always hoped to be wrong about. Reading the air correctly did not mean you could change what it was doing. You could read it. You could not stop it. She thought about writing a letter. She sat with the thought for a long time. She had 2 piles. The letters she sent and the ones she did not send. She went to both piles. She looked at the dates. She had written more letters in the past year than in the 2 years before. She had sent fewer of them. This was not grief. She recognized grief. This was something adjacent. The state of a person who has been paying close attention to something for a long time, and has now reached the end of it. Not empty. Full of what she had been reading. She put the letter tablet away. She went to the window. The sea in November was gray and honest. It was the color of the flat light she read reports in. The color of things that do not ask to be looked at in a particular way. She looked at it. She had thought about what would remain. Not in a morbid way. In the way she thought about everything. With the specific attention she had given things for 60 years. She had thought, what has been built? What holds? The grain law. Running. She knew this because she had people in Rome who sent reports. She had maintained the practice. The system was running. The grain was moving. The price was what the law said. The roads. There. The jury reform. In place. The colonial survey. In a committee. The committee would not move. She had predicted this in August 2 years ago. She had written it in the small tablet. She had been correct. The things that had been built were running. The man who built them was 32 years old. In the grove at Farina. The knot. She had thought, this is the distance between a thing and the person who builds it. The thing continues. The person is a different kind of problem. She wrote one letter. It went to the commission administrator, the equestrian who had run the grain accounts since the first year. She had met him once. He had steady hands and a careful voice. He had maintained the format of the reports. He had kept the variance notation. She wrote, the format is correct. Continue. She did not explain why she was writing. She did not think explanation was needed. The man with steady hands and a careful voice would understand a short note. He would understand that. The note said, the work matters. Continue. She sealed it. She sent it. She went back to the window. The November sea. She had been watching it for 30 years from this house. She had watched it as a young woman, as a wife, as a mother, as a widow, as a person receiving reports. Had not changed. The sea did not change in any season you could name. It changed in ways that were longer than seasons. She was past 60. She watched it. Chapter 17, The Count After. The grain law lasted 9 years in modified form. The Senate modified it twice. Gaius had designed it to be modified rather than killed. Modification kept it running. A thing that runs in modified form is better than a thing that does not run at all. He had understood this before he wrote the law. He had written in modifications rather than prohibitions. The roads ran for 200 years, some of them longer. The stone did not care about political seasons. The stone was there in BC 121. It was there in AD 20. Same stone. Same work. Connecting the things that needed connecting. The jury reform ran 12 years. Then Sulla reversed it. Then a version of it came back. Then it was modified. Then modified. Again. The idea of the mixed jury outlasted the specific law. This is how ideas work in Rome. The law is the container. The idea is what the container held. You can break the container. The idea goes somewhere else. Opimius was prosecuted 7 years later. This is worth noting. He had passed the emergency decree. It had directed the killing. He had been consul. He had believed everything he had done was necessary. He had filed everything carefully. 7 years later, a tribune prosecuted him for using the emergency decree to kill Roman citizens without trial. The citizens had had legal rights. The rights had not been suspended. The decree had said whatever is necessary. The tribune said, killing citizens without trial was not within whatever. Opimius was found guilty. He was exiled. He had kept careful notes. The notes did not help him. The man who keeps careful notes still has to answer for what he did when the political wind changes. Opimius had understood political winds. He had not understood that they changed in both directions. He lived in exile for a long time. He was not a sympathetic figure. He was also not a simple one. The young man from Capua continued the survey. He worked for the commission for 3 more years. He produced accurate reports. He never got the angles wrong again after the morning Gaius showed him. He moved to a smaller town south of Capua and worked as a land surveyor. He was precise and careful, and he did not explain his methods to the men who hired him. He did the work. His name was not in any document that survived. He was in the survey reports, listed as a crew member, given a function description but no full name. The function description said, angle measurement. That was his role. He had been good at it. He had learned from the person who had shown him. He had not needed to know whose name he was learning from to learn the thing correctly. The name Gaius Sempronius Gracchus appeared in documents for 100 years. Then it appeared less often. Then it appeared in the documents that were about the laws. He had done what he had tried to do. He had separated the work from the name. The work continued. The name became a reference rather than a presence. A reference is a kind of continuing, not the same kind as a road. Roads do not need references. They are there. A name that becomes a reference needs people to read the references. The references require documents. The documents require the kind of institution that keeps documents. Rome kept documents for a long time. The references continued. The name was read by people who had never seen the Forum, had never stood on the Aventine, who would never eat grain from a depot he had designed or walk a road he had measured. They read the references. They argued about what the references meant. This was correct. The references were about things worth arguing about. The jury, the grain, the Italian question that he had never been able to resolve, the distance between what Rome was and what it could be. That argument was still running. It had not finished. Chapter 18, The Last Count. There is a road south of Rome. He walked it in November of BC 121, after the second election. He had not been re-elected. He had walked anyway. He had walked it the way he walked everything important. With attention. With the rod in his mind and the count going. The milestones were there. He stopped at each one. He checked the facing, the alignment, the condition of the stone at the base where the ground met the marker. He had seen stone markers at the base develop small cracks in wet seasons. He had designed these markers with a drainage cut at the base. The drainage cut kept the water from sitting. The markers were correct. He expected this. He checked anyway. He stood at the last marker before the road curved south, toward the grain towns. The city was behind him. Rome, the Forum, the Rostra, the bread woman at the edge who said, different, the early arrivals, who had started coming later, the committee session on the colony, the 12 names and 12 locations that Drusus had named without surveys. All of it was behind him. In front, the road going south, the markers continuing beyond the curve. He had not walked past this point today. He had turned back at this marker before. He turned back again now. He had work to do. The documents, the commission accounts, the letter to the Italian men. He had work. He turned. He walked back toward the city. The road was the same going back as going south. This should be obvious. He thought about it anyway. The same stone, the same markers, the same drainage at the base of each, the same spacing. The road did not know you were returning. It was just there, in both directions. He had built something that did not know which direction you were traveling. It served both. The grain went south. The people went north. The road served both and asked nothing about the direction. He walked back. He thought about the count. He had always counted. The exits, the markers, the attendance, the days, the votes. He had been counting things for as long as he could remember, thinking carefully about anything. The count was how he knew where he was. He did not know, walking back on the road in November, what the final count would be. He knew some of the numbers. 341,000 recipients in October. 9 routes. 7 modified boundary markers. 3 court convictions in 15 months. 1 colonial survey. Complete. Not approved. complete. He had the numbers he had. He did not have the ones he did not have yet. He counted what he could count. He filed what he could file. He turned toward what was next. He was always turning toward what was next. The city appeared ahead of him. First the smoke. Rome always appeared first as smoke. Then the walls. Then the rooftops. Then the specific buildings. The temple. The top of the rostra. The colonnade he had walked. At dusk 100 times. He walked toward it. He thought, I have work. I have the grain law and the roads. And the jury reform and the survey. I have the Italian question. In the document case. I have the names. I have 9 more months. He walked. He went back to the desk. He went back to the work. The road behind him connected the city to the grain towns. It connected the depots to the farms. It connected the people who ate to the people who grew. He had measured it. He had walked it. He had checked the markers. The markers were correct. He had expected this. He checked anyway. He always did. Chapter 19. The day after the Aventine. The morning after the Aventine, the forum opened as usual. The merchants came. The lawyers came. The clients came to find their patrons. The clients of the patrons who were no longer available found other people to stand beside. This happened without instruction. The forum had been doing this for 200 years. It knew how to open in the morning. The grain depots opened at the 6th hour. The recipients came. They brought their tablets. The tablets were checked. The grain was distributed. 340-something thousand households. The number had been updated since October. He had not been there to update it. The administrator had updated it. The administrator had been trained to update it. The training had taken 2 weeks in the 2nd month of the 1st year. He had done that training himself. Flaccus did not survive the Aventine. He had moved too fast as he always moved. He believed his conviction speed would carry the gap between what he had and what the situation required. He had been right about this many times before. He had been wrong this time. He had been a consul. He had done useful work. He had been loyal and direct and sometimes faster than the situation allowed for. He had maintained the contact with the Italian men. He had read the letters from Frigelli. He had understood what the letter said. He had died on the Aventine. This is not a complicated thing to say. He had been on the hill. He had made decisions on the hill. The decisions had a specific ending. The ending was the ending. The world he had been part of continued without him. The world always does. It is not indifferent. It is simply continuous. The continuity is not a comment on the person. It is the nature of continuity. The Italian men received no word for several weeks. Then they received word. The word came through unofficial channels. Not through Flaccus, who could no longer send word. Not through Gaius, who could no longer send word. Through the men on the list who had been maintaining contact. The word said, the decree has been used. The men on the Aventine are gone. The question is in the record. The Italian men read this. They put the letter away. They went to work. This is what people do. In Capua and Cumae and Nola and the other towns on the list. They went to the farms. They went to the workshops. They went to the families. They did the work that was in front of them. The question was in the record. The record was in Rome. Permanent. The next person who went looking would find it. The road south of Rome had its first winter. Stone roads in their first winter sometimes show problems that the summer and autumn do not reveal. The movement of water in cold ground. The expansion of moisture in small cracks. The weight of wagons in wet conditions. The road commission sent inspectors in December. The inspectors walked all 9 routes. They made notes. They sent reports. The reports noted 2 sections requiring minor repair. One near the 2nd milestone south of the city. One at the junction of the 3rd and 7th routes. Both were repaired before the spring. The repairs were in the maintenance budget. He had written the maintenance budget. He had written it in the road commission charter in the spring of BC 123. He had anticipated first winter problems. He had budgeted for them. The road continued through its first winter. It would continue through many more. Chapter 20. The Seed Marius Found. Gaius Marius entered the Forum in BC 115. 6 years after the growth. He was a new man. Not from one of the families. He had been born in Opimius. He had been a soldier. He had been good at the soldier things, moving armies, reading ground, making decisions under fire. He was not good at the Forum things. The warmth before the first sentence, the patient positioning. He was direct in the way that direct people are in the Forum, which is sometimes wrong. He had known Gaius Gracchus. Not closely. They had been in the same city at the same time. He had watched from the back of crowds. He had seen the movement, the speeches, the grain law passing. He had seen the Forum in September when Gaius came back from Africa. Walked the square. Something had settled while he was gone. He had been in that Forum. He had felt it settle. He used the grain law. Not in a legal way. In a practical way. He needed soldiers for the African campaigns. He needed men who had been eating at something close to the rate the law provided. Men who had been short on grain were short on the things that built soldiers. The law had been running for 6 years. The men who had been eating from the depots for 6 years were different from the men who had not. This was not something he could put in a report. It was a thing you felt when you were putting men through training. The ones who had eaten well were different. He did not credit Gaius Gracchus publicly. He was not a man who gave credit publicly for things he could use. Without crediting, most useful things become the background. The background is nobody's credit. He used it. He also used the road. The road south had been running for 7 years by the time he needed it. It connected the city to the grain towns, the grain towns to the ports to the southern campaigns. He moved supply lines along it. The supply lines moved faster than they would have moved on the old dirt tracks that the road had replaced. He noted this in the campaign accounts. Not by name. By result. Result, supply time reduced by 2 days on southern routes. 2 days. He had not thought about 2 days until he needed things quickly. 2 days was the difference between resupplied and not. The road had been checked in November. It had been checked in December. It had been maintained through 4 winters. The maintenance was in the budget. It was just a road now. Marius used it. Sulla entered the Forum in BC 110. Marius was still there. They would eventually destroy each other. This is how Rome worked in that period. The tool that solved one problem was used until it became the problem. Sulla had read about the tribunate. He had been young during it. He had opinions about Gaius Gracchus. He believed the tribunate had been a kind of danger. He believed the emergency decree had been necessary. He held his beliefs carefully. He also used the road. He also benefited from the grain system his campaigns depended. He did not acknowledge this. Sulla acknowledged only what he chose to acknowledge. He reversed the jury reform. He reorganized the Senate. He changed many things. He changed them because he could. He was right that he could. He was wrong about what would happen after. The road stayed. The maintenance budget continued. The winter repairs continued. The depots had been modified twice. They ran at a lower level. They still ran. Chapter 21. The Grove and the Road. The grove at Farina is still there. Not the same trees. Trees do not last as long as stone. But the site is there. The ground holds the shape of what it was. Ground remembers what happened to it longer than stone does. In a different way. Stone holds the weight and the cold. Ground holds the water and the life. He stood there in November of BC 121. He had done what he could do with the time he had. The design was in the documents. The documents were in the right hands. The administrators had their formats and their variants, notations and their supply schedules. The roads had their milestone markers. The markers had their drainage cuts. The markers were correct. The road was still there 200 years later. Some historians wrote about it. They wrote about the road commissioner who built it, the tribune who authorized it, the man who walked it with a rod. They did not always agree on what it meant. One historian said he was trying to build a permanent base of power. Another said he was trying to solve a supply problem. A third said both. A fourth said the question is not what he was trying to do. The question is what he did. What he did, he measured it. He walked it. He checked the markers in November after the election he had lost. He had expected the markers to be correct. He checked them anyway. The historians argued about the motive. The road went south regardless of the motive. There is something he said in the forum in BC 123. He was speaking about the Italian question. He had the leather worker and the grain merchant and the veteran. He had been building the case for 20 minutes. The crowd was with him. They had understood what he was building toward before he arrived. He stopped. He looked at the crowd. He said, I know what this city is. I've walked every part of it that can be walked. I know who is here. He paused. He said, I also know what it could be. He said, the distance between those two things is not as large as it has been made to appear. It is a distance that can be walked. He turned. He gave them the next piece. The distance. He had been walking it for 2 years. He had not closed it. He had not expected to close it. He had expected to walk it. He had walked it. He had measured the sections he could measure. He had put the measurements in documents. He had put the documents in the right hands. He had built things you could touch. The grain that arrived at the right price. The road that cut 2 days to 1. The jury that convicted when the old jury would not have. The survey that said, the ground is workable. The test row that said the same thing more simply. He had built them and checked them and walked them. He had put the names of the Italian men in the document case. He had sent the messenger first. He had walked across the bridge without running. The distance was still there. He had walked some of it. The next person would start from where he had walked to. This is how distances work. You do not close them alone. You walk as far as you can. You put what you have learned in the record. The next person starts from the end of your walk. He had started from where his brother ended. Someone else would start from where he had ended. He did not know who. He had known that he did not need to know. Chapter 22, The Final Numbers. He made a final count on the last day of his second term. He did not sit down to do it. He did it walking. He walked from the grain depot in the Subura to the road commission office, to the court records room, back to his desk. He counted as he walked. He had always counted when he walked. Walking helped the count. At the depot, 351,000 recipients. Updated. The October numbers had been high. The December numbers were higher. People had come to know the depots over 2 years. Word had moved slowly through the parts of the city where word moved slowly. At the road commission, 9 routes, all complete. First winter. Repairs done. Maintenance schedule in place for the spring. The man who ran the commission had the format and the variants, notation and the supply schedules. At the court records, 5 convictions in 18 months. The first 2 had established the pattern. The next 3 had followed it. The pattern was real. 5 was not a trend. 5 was the beginning of a trend. A trend required more. The more would come after him. It would still be a trend. At his desk, the document case, the survey, the soil tests, the yield projections, the name of the young man from Capua, and the names of the Italian men, the leather worker, the grain merchant, the veteran. He had the numbers. He had the names. He set both down. He thought about what the second term had produced. He had thought the second term would be harder. He had been right. He had thought the reduced margin meant a reduced base. He had been right. He had thought Drusus would continue to offer more of things Gaius had begun. He had been right. He had worked anyway. He had completed the road commission. He had extended the grain distribution. He had secured the court reform through 5 convictions. He had finalized the colonial survey. He had tried the Italian bill 3 more times. He had put the results in the record. The record was correct. He had always cared more about the record being correct than about the record saying what he wanted. The correct record was a record that future people could use. A record that said what you wanted it to say was a record for now, not for later. He had built for later. He did not know what later would look like. He had built for it anyway. He counted the exits from the forum one last time. 3 if you counted the lane by the Temple of Saturn. He had counted them on the first morning of the first year. He had made it a decision so it would not become a habit. It had become a habit anyway. He had caught himself at it many times in 2 years. Each time he stopped, he made it a decision again. Each time the number was 3. It was still 3. He filed the number. He set down the tablet. The term was over. The grain was moving. The roads were there. The courts had a pattern. The survey was complete. The names were in the document case. The record was correct. He closed the document case. He had built what he could build. He had checked it. It was ready for the next person. The system was still there. It would be there tomorrow. It would be there in 10 years. He had built it that way. He had designed the system with one principle above all others. The principle was not efficiency, not fairness, not durability, though he cared about durability. The principle was this: the system should outlast the person who built it. A system that required the builder to keep running was not a system. It was a person. Persons died. Persons were exiled. Persons lost elections. Persons could be prosecuted under emergency. Decrees by consuls who believed they were restoring order. He had designed for the absence of the builder. He had put the grain lists in 3 different hands. He had written the maintenance schedule into the road commission charter. He had built the court reform so that the jury pool was determined by selection, not by appointment. No one person controlled the selection. The selection ran. He had made himself removable. This was not pessimism. This was design. A builder who makes himself necessary has not built a system. He has built a dependency. Dependencies fail when the person they depend on is removed. He had removed himself from the critical path. He had done this on purpose. He had done it because he had a brother who had been on the critical path, and his brother had been removed. And the thing his brother had built had ended when he was removed. He did not want that. He had wanted something that would run after. He had built what he could build. The running was the test. In the forum in November, his last November as tribune, he stood at the rostra, not to speak. The session was over. He was alone at the end of it. The merchants had gone. The clients had gone. The early arrivals who had started coming later had gone. The bread woman at the edge had closed her stall. He stood. He looked at the square. He had been looking at this square for 2 years from this platform. He had given 43 speeches from it. He had given the early morning crowd the problems they needed to understand. He had given them the grain law and the road commission and the jury reform and the Italian men. He had given them what he had. He looked at the square. The square was empty. He had learned things about this square that he would not have learned any other way. The sight line to the back. The place where his voice carried farthest. The part of the crowd that arrived first and stayed latest. The quality of the light at the second hour in January versus July. The torch at the corner that always burned lower than the others. He had been here. He had learned this place. He turned. He walked away from the rostra. He had work to do. He had one more thing to check. He went back to the road south of Rome. The markers. He had checked them in November. He had checked them in December. He was checking them again now. Not because he doubted them. Because the practice was the practice. The markers were correct. He had expected this. He filed the number. He walked back to the city. The system was still running. He had done what he could do. The ground was workable. The road went south. The count held. The grain was moving. The road went south. The markers stood in the dark. He had built it to run without him. It was running. He did not need to be in it for it to run. This had been the point. He had known from the first day. You build the thing. You check the thing. You hand the thing to the right people. You get out of the way of the thing. The thing runs. This is what it looks like when a system works. Nobody talks about it. It is just there. Tuesday and Thursday. The depot opens. The grain is at the right price. The variance is 4%. Within range. Acceptable. He had designed acceptable. He had built it into the charter. Acceptable was the goal. Not perfect. Not permanent. Running within acceptable range. Indefinitely. In the hands of people who understood the format. Running. Writer's note. I do not read Gaius Gracchus as a failed reformer. I watch him send the son of Flaccus to negotiate first. He knew Opimius would send him back. He sent him anyway. There would be a record. A record of a request for negotiation refused. He built for the record. He put things in documents and in rotes. And in the hands of people who would continue the work. He checked the milestone markers in November. They were correct. He expected them to be. He checked anyway. The grain law ran for 9 years after his death. The roads were harder to remove than any law. They went somewhere. Specific and connected things that needed connecting. They did not know who had built them. This was the design. He understood that the thing you build may outlast you without acknowledging you. He built it anyway. He checked it anyway. He put the names in the document case and sent the messenger. And walked across the bridge without running. He did what could be done. Next time, Misenum. The sea. She is still there.